That was actually a perfect segue into our next presentation, actually by Stephen Morey on creating a new script, bringing the Tangsa language into the Facebook era. So perfect segue. And I think you do have presenter rights, I believe. So
yes, and I will just mention as I'm organizing the sharing of the screen that my colleague and friend and consultant Wanglung Mosang was talking about possibly trying to come to the presentation this morning, but it is 4 a.m. in India, I think. We just started summertime here last night, so I'm a little confused as to what time it actually is anywhere, something that David Bradley will also know. Anyway, I think it's the right time for my talk, and I'm going to be talking about bringing the Tangsa languages into the Facebook era via the creation of a new script. And I've turned off the floating meeting control, so if someone wants to talk to me, you'll have to actually speak, not put it in the chat. So brief overview of the Tangsa varieties, brief overview of the various writing systems that have been used since time immemorial, and then hopefully most of the talk I'll be able to talk about the creation of the script by the late Mr. Lakum Yoka Mashang, who passed away in July, and this is something that we are very interested to now talk about his script. Okay, so Tangsa, which is the name that most linguists will know this group of varieties by, and Tangshang, which is the name used in Burma, and these two words are not cognate, are both relatively recent names. It's around 80 different sub-tribes, each having its own distinct linguistic variety. Some of those are basically entirely mutually intelligible. Some of those are basically completely unintelligible, and quite a few in between. I will just mention in passing here that Tangshang in Myanmar includes a larger group of varieties than Tangsa in India. Tangshang in Myanmar would also include languages that are called Nokte in India, and indeed Wancho and probably Tutsa too. It's quite complicated. Each group has its own, each one of these sub-tribes or linguistic groups has its own autonym. So for example, the Mershang call themselves Mershang. They've recently changed the way they want to Romanize this, and I haven't actually updated this presentation fully to reflect that. And each group has a name for each other group. So the people who call themselves Cholim are called Donglum in general. Some others call them Dulim, some others call them Tilim. They call the Mosang or the Mershang as Myochang, and the Mosang call the Cholim as Cholum, etc. So you can see there's quite a different, a complex situation here. Just to give you an idea of the diversity of these languages, here is an example from a traditional story of the sentence, I cannot carry them, written in 4 different Tangsa varieties. So for example, the Cholim will say Nige Lotmang, and the Lotang will say Ni Hui Daimao. Now the words Hul, Gu, Hui, and Gun for carry are obviously cognate, whereas the words for able, Chi, Lot, Dai, and Nok are obviously not. There is cognacy between the forms of the verbal agreement markers, but that would be a whole other talk to discuss. Okay, so the history of writing in the Tangsa varieties can be broadly divided into 6 stages. There's the folk stories of the ancient form of the writing done on skins of animals that was lost when it was eaten. There's the writing down of word lists by scholars starting in the 19th century, continuing through to the present day, by outsider linguists effectively. There's Roman-based orthographies designed for use as a common language, particularly for Bible translation and hymn books, and now developing into literacy development as well. Orthographies designed for single sub-tribes to preserve individual cultural information, more informal orthographies that don't claim to be phonemic really, and the non-Roman based scripts. I'll just mention here very briefly 2 things that I want you to bear in mind as I'm speaking. The first is that The non-Roman based scripts have been created completely independently of any involvement by linguists. There's a second script, the Wancho script, now implemented in Unicode that Mr. Banwanglosu has created, and I won't have time to talk about that. But this was done entirely independently of any outside influence. Okay, so the script since time immemorial, we don't know anything about what this writing was like, but here you can very briefly read the history of this script. This is a very common story across this part of the world. I have put this script into 3 different orthographies, namely the Reverend Gam Win's Romanized system, Lakum Mosang's Tangsa script, and the Tangshang Naga unified orthography. But I have to say at this point that all 3 have undergone some minor revisions since I created this table, which was back in January, and I didn't update it for this presentation, but you get the general idea. Not time to discuss that in detail. Stage 2, this is sort of outsider linguists' attempts to write the language. So this is Needham's 1897 book on Mashaung. Some of you have heard me speak about this before. The first 2 sentences are really significant because they preserve a verbal agreement system that is now more or less redundant and has been replaced by a different system. And here's an example of a linguist's work. This is Dr. Mika Mulder's transcription of the Muklom variety of a story using an IPA-based script. Stage 3, which is bringing the languages into Romanization by community members, starts in the 1970s with this Ngaimong primer. This is the story of the goat, Kilkai, Lam meaning road. This particular orthography was not permitted to be used and most of the books destroyed, but fortunately this one survived and could be photographed. The Reverend Younger, back in the 1990s, early 1990s, commenced a Bible translation with the support of the Tangsa Baptist Churches Association on the India side. That organization decided to adopt his Chamchang variety as the common language, and members of the Baptist Church in India are required to use the Chamchang Bible and hymn book in church. I won't talk in very much detail about this, except that Reverend Younger did introduce tone marking in his first orthographies, but has more or less not continued with it. One reason being the difficulty that he has and others in identifying the tones for many words, and particular problem words such as the word for children, which people did not like the look of. So, and here's an example from his Bible. So for those of you who know Luke chapter 19, this is the story of Zacchaeus, the tax collector, and you can see the words there, but you can also see there is no tone marking here. There's no final X or F or Z or any of the other tone markers that are used in some of the other varieties. On the Myanmar side, they have revised Reverend Younger's system, made certain changes to fit with the way that things work better on the Myanmar side, marked the tones and created a writing system there. And here you can see final X's and final Z's, which are marking tones. Words that don't have a final X or a final Z are in an unmarked tone category, a mid-tone category. And you can see here the difference between the way that Reverend Younger would write the first 2 words down the bottom, or the heading of this, and the way that it is written today in the Shikja system. And then there is the Romanized script created by the Reverend Gam Win for the Mashaung variety. I'll let you just read that in the background because I don't want to lose time to talk about Lakum's script, but here you can have an example of that. Because this was created for the Mashaung variety, this particular script is being used side by side in some sense with the new script. Here's another example, Joglai writing. I haven't time to talk about that. Here's an example of a script created by an individual subtribe, the Yangbanbang, or sometimes called Ransi, to preserve the information about them. And here tones are marked with dots, and also the use of V for a short A or schwa-like vowel, which is very common in that part of the world as well. And here is a stage 5. So this is a sort of informal orthography created by the Muklong people because they couldn't understand hymns in the Chamchang variety, so they translated them into their own variety. But this is not something which has any sort of official status. Notice that it uses the word dialogue, which is the local Indian English way that the word dialect is spelt and pronounced. And that brings us to Lakum Mosang script. So the late Lakum Mosang is standing on the left there next to me, and next to two of his most committed followers, people who have Mr. Manpo and Mr. Yoka, who have developed great expertise in the script. They are essentially farmers. They're not very highly educated in a formal sense, but they can use this script completely. It was created originally in 1990, now has 48 symbols for vowels and sounds considered by the inventor to be vowel-like. This includes final ang and syllabic nasal sounds. And these are listed first in the alphabet. So this is already a significant innovation compared to many other alphabets in the area, that the vowels take preferences. There are 31 consonants and 10 numerals, and that's a fully decimal numeral system. The key design feature of the script, and I think this is really important, is that for each vowel there are 4 separate symbols, which are unrelated in form to each other, mostly, and correspond to the 4 different tone categories of Tangsar languages. So in our academic works, people like myself and Kellen van Dam, who's a former PhD student now at the University of Zurich, we call these tone 1, tone 2, tone 3, and tone 4. Tone 4 corresponds to stop final syllables. The other 3 have open final syllables, which can have final vowels, final nasals, and sometimes L or even L and R, depending on the varieties. Some varieties don't allow those finals, others do. In the Mashang variety, tone 1 is low falling, tone 2 is a mid-high falling tone, and tone 3 is mid-high level or rising, but the realization of these tones differs from variety to variety. So these are tone categories. Okay, so here's Lakum Mosang introducing his script. I'll just check that I definitely have the share computer sound on. I do. And I want you to see how he traditionally taught it.
Tangsa Tangsang Naga Language Common Script 73 Lingual 1992 2009 Part 1 Vowels 46 Lingual Reading System 1O 2O 3O 4O 5R 6R 7R 8R.
Okay, so his traditional way of teaching it was in that order: learn number 1, learn number 2, learn number 3, and so on. And I'm going to give you this again, and so that you can hear them more clearly. And here we have the symbols written on the top of the lower table here. Underneath that, we have a sort of an IPA interpretation of them. I'm honestly not sure that that is the best way of doing it. Underneath that, we have a sort of tone categories description with a little information about the features of the tones in the table above. And the 4th line, OZ, OC, OQ, OX, is the Romanized version of the Reverend Gam Win.
1O 2O 3O 4O 5R 6R 7R 8R.
So the important thing to remember here is that you cannot simply write in this script a word that does not mark tone. in any one of the Romanized orthographies, you can leave off the tone mark, which is either going to be some kind of diacritic, a dot or an accent or something, or a final letter like an X or a Z or a Y. But this self-created script started years before any linguists were in contact with any members of this community directly, although it is after the period that Alphonse Weidert interviewed some people living at Shillong, but it's not actually likely that the creator of this script was even aware of that. So years before that, he has created a fully phonemically marked tone system in this writing system. Okay, here's the full set of vowels as at the latest version. And as you'll be hearing shortly, there is currently a proposal to go to the Unicode committee. It was approved by what's called the Unicode ad hoc committee a week ago, well, actually 8 days ago. 8 days ago at this minute, I was attending the meeting proposing it to them, and it is likely to be approved at the next Unicode meeting and included in Unicode in about a year's time. And so possibly in about 3 years' time, it'll be possible to send text messages with it, maybe. Here are the consonants. Now, he's been very careful to create a symbol for every consonant sound that he is aware of in any other Tangsa language. And this actually brings us to an interesting point. The script has made a definite attempt to be able to write the consonant symbols of other Tangsa languages. So if we look, for example, at the bottom here, there are some symbols like X, F, Ev, Cha, the aspirated Cha, and Z, which are not found in Mershon. So the creator was sufficiently aware of other languages to know that these would be needed, but he has not been equally aware of different vowel contrasts that are present in some other varieties. So if just go back to the previous slide, if this script is going to be used by all the different Tangsa varieties, some of them may have to make some alterations to the way in which some of these vowel sounds are used. And we'll certainly have to make alterations to the tones, because whereas tone 1 in Mershon is a low tone and tone 2 in Mershon is more or less mid but falling, and tone 3 is high, in some other varieties, it's the other way around, but we'll come to that. So up until the creation of a really usable font, which really only became the case sort of middle of last year, and the revised version that we worked on in the field in January is now fully usable. Everything that was done in this script was done by handwriting. And here is a traditional song written by Lakum Mosang. Now, the important thing for me about this document is that not only is it an example of a fully phonemic system that was created to write something, but it is also one of the very few examples of someone writing down traditional information about the community, such as a traditional song, using a writing system, because at the point that I started recording and trying to write down these songs, which was December 2007, there seem to have been only 2 others that have done the same, and Lakum Mosang was the other, and Mr. Baike Mungre on the Myanmar side using a Romanized script of his own that I haven't shown you. It's the only other person, I believe, that wrote down the traditional song before that date. So here is that same, here is not that same one, a different one of these Vihu songs translated into Lakum's script. I can't promise that this is actually completely up to date, because there have been a couple of minor revisions to the script since we created this, and I need to go back over that with Wanglung Mosang shortly, and I don't know whether he's had a chance to get into the room or has been able to wake up early or not. Okay, so the current situation. So the font, a draft version of the font was made quite a few years ago by a former PhD student of mine. That was then revised by me to deal with some of the updates to it that the script's founder wanted, and then again revised by Kellen Van Dam last year and again this year in January when we were in the field. So the Unicode proposal, it was presented to the Script Ad Hoc Committee on the 28th of August and again a week ago. There was a meeting of the Tangsa Script Development Committee, which was formed last year, again independently of any feelings from any linguists, and we had a meeting on the 27th of January. There is the preparation of a primer and video teaching materials underway, and I can put the link to the video that Wang Long and I have made for teaching this script for anyone who wants that. I can put that into the chat later when I find it. And we've developed for tools for the coronavirus message, but I'm not sure I have a picture of that here. So here's the Tangsa Script Development Committee. There's Kellen in the background. There's Dipjyoti Goswami, PhD student of ours, talking with one of the members of the Rira community about how they would apply this script in Rira. There's the full group photo of those attending that meeting. And finally, I'll just play a little bit of Lakum Mosang singing his song, and we'll stop there.
Ara tong sa nuk moal si arka rong lo ya moal nyo si cheng ara ngo sa vi si ngo sho lepan vo si lepan ya den ya rem ya nga Jariam này jadan này jariam polos situ number 1 hello chawaka tumatelo ave ngon humatelo se viajum sama awang shu kevu ayum sama adang shu He batang sa punay no kre Kau ne mondan ngo atle Jab jong yau chan ngo atle.
And that is the only example of anyone reading and singing such a song. I think I better stop there. I'm probably over time.
Thank you. That was great. I do have a couple questions, but I want to open up to anybody else first if somebody has questions or comments.
Yeah, I had a quick comment. Stephen, Lakum script looks great. I love the vowel system. But you were saying it looked to me like he made a halfway attempt, a little inconsistent, to relate all the vowels together, independent of tone. Like A would have a circle, A would have a straight vertical line, sort of like Ge'ez in Amharic or something.
Yeah, well, if we, I might just quickly go back and share the screen again so we can look at the vowels. Sorry, it might take a moment to get back to them. Yeah, so no, that's the consonants. So when we look at the vowels for the O series, there isn't too much in common between those first 4 symbols.
There's a circle in each.
There is a circle in each. Yes, I guess that's true. There is some sort of vertical symbol in all the R's, and perhaps you could say that certainly the E symbols have something in common, and I guess it's more obvious with some of them with others than with others.
And the at the bottom.
Certainly, yes. And in fact, telling these ones apart, the ram's horn ones down the bottom, I still haven't got them completely organized. But for example, yes, I did associate a sort of U-like symbol with oo, but then that didn't really work for the oo at the end here, and then this or doesn't quite, yeah. So yeah, there is something like that happening.
That's what makes it authentic, because it's not completely consistent, just like other scripts.
Definitely not completely consistent. I should mention that the ones which are here written with V, which is the short up-like symbol, this was newly added by the Tangsa Script Development Committee rather than by the creator. That would be the whole process leading to that would be another story. But yeah, thank you for that point.
Very good.
Go ahead and oh, sorry. Nope, go ahead. Somebody's going to ask a question.
Yeah, I had a question. This is really interesting, Stephen. Thank you so much. My question is about readability, and I guess time will tell. All right. So when I've read somewhere, when people were working in South America, when SIL was developing scripts, that when there was more of a phonetic, detail given, that it was sometimes harder to read than when there was less given. And so I guess one question I had was, this is all phonetic tone, right? So this is what you hear is what you write. And I can see that there would be maybe more agreement so it seems like there would be some questions about readability and also standardization. Like, do people get confused because what they're writing what they hear and so on? This is not to detract from this. It's just a question of, time will tell what may need to be changed or modified.
So I wanted, I think, to make two quick points about the use of the script and this question of readability, because certainly it's a fair point that people would say, well, why not adopt an already existing script such as the Roman or something else that's in use locally, and that has already been done. So why not do that? It'd be easier for people to learn. Well, so 2 points I'd make about this. Firstly, this is work that the community itself is leading. So I'm in a sense just documenting here what they're saying, but helping them out with dealing with Unicode committees and so on, because that is technically challenging. So this is being led by the community. That's the first point. Second point would be that the number of people who understand this script thoroughly and can use it fully and with full comprehension of it is relatively small. But the number of people that can do that with any of the standardized Roman-based orthographies is equally small. So all those Roman-based orthographies I showed you before, the TNUO or the Gumwin system, is also, particularly the ones that mark tones, the number of people that can use them with, in a sense, full fluency is also very small. So as you say, time will tell. Will this come about or not? What I can mention is not so much in connection with this script, but in connection with the script that, and I don't think I've got sorry, didn't mean to do that. Yes, the script that Banwang Losu has created for Wancho, which is on this page here. They are producing materials to teach this. They are already teaching this in schools. Children are doing examinations in it. So it may well be that in a few years' time, yes, these things will be successful. I don't know.
That was kind of similar to one of my questions about, just thinking with any sort of morphophonemics or, phonological process that impacts the tone, will it be morphologically transparent, or so they have the underlying form with the original tone, or do they switch it so you can really see? I'm curious how that.
Very good question. Yeah, very good question. And this question applies equally, of course, to Romanized script. So I'll give two answers on this point. Firstly, there is verb stem alternation in these languages, and in most cases, the alternate stem of the verb, which is usually associated with a nominalized form, is indicated by a different tone. So in effect, the tone changes category, and that's what causes the stem, and that's what marks the alternate stem. So this would be written in a system like this with a different vowel symbol. And it would be written in other Tangsa variety, in the Romanized systems, it would be written with a different final consonant, changing changing a Z to an X or a C or whatever the symbol for writing the tone category that the alternate stems are in. But there is one Tangsa variety, the Lochang, for which they are working on writing it using one of these Romanized standard orthographies. But there are some quite complex tone sandhi processes that we don't yet fully understand. And we do not yet have a way of marking these, but the native speakers of the variety say, no, this tone isn't like any of the others we've written before. We have to write it with something else. And so, yes, that issue is going to come up.
Interesting. I know we are about at time, so sorry, I'll hold my other question. I don't know if anybody else has one, or I believe there is a brief 15-minute break, and then there is the National Science Foundation special session on IGT, which looks super interesting. So, and I don't know, Mary, is that in the same, the room isn't listed on the schedule. I'm not sure.
Yeah, all of the special sessions are going to be in room 1. So for the break, probably I would shift from here to then room 1 and stay there until the session.
Okay, perfect.
Thanks to the speakers.
Yes, thank you so much. They were all great sessions. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye. See you guys all in room 1.
Right.